So I think the shit is in the sky. When I remove the hole that the smell of shit often comes up here, it just came up again. And I have no fucking clue as to why or how. You know, the one that I keep talking about that I can smell in here, all of a sudden it rises and then disappears. And I was thinking that was something they threw all that in the back, but it might be on the ceiling. I don't know. All I know is I removed the board and all of a sudden it smells. There's just blocking the wind from going this way. And I removed that. Oh shit. Let's take it back. Right. Another thing I was thinking about the one that I mentioned I don't think that career criminals in this to talk about organized crime, money or not, stuff like that. Nothing again, simply a bunch of people we mentioned before. But I just want to propose something that's clearly something that is trying to be sold. And this is something that happened throughout this crime of this and shit trying to boost some type of this. Also often changing what it does and it doesn't. And always in that stuff that it goes from the Italian Americans doing their hand gesture that not a single self-respecting Italian American makes, because it's essentially like a black guy identifying himself to a white person as a nigger. Right, it's a stereotypical racial thing that you wouldn't see anyone do because it'd be seen as meaningless. Right. So, from that to the other one, always as I mentioned before, the full embodiment of someone trying to pretend to be someone else. Well, just saying. And in general, I just pointed it out and I read that to you as terms that I said. I don't know who's doing this. Perhaps they might be in these things, and I don't know, and so we'll take that as a sign that it's a clear off. But also the point is, and I think that's abundantly obvious, that I don't want to necessarily, I wouldn't want to sound like that's the case if that's not, because if it isn't the case, yeah, I mean, I don't need to, I think the idea at this point that I would say that I don't need to say at all, that I'm capable of drugs is lawful, and because it's lawful, I don't think I need to comment on that. But at the same pace, my purpose here, much like it's a thing about political, and the best argument is that I would try to remain apolitical, even though they clearly have political views as far as their, especially foreign politics in the U.S. or other places, because I don't want this crime. I don't want to give them the leg up, right? The same thing I say to you, that I try to do everything to help you out. Yeah, I'm trying to do that for them. So, not allowing this to turn into a political thing to be debated, particularly political about, another country than where this is happening. Which is why, despite the fact that I have opinions, I frankly mostly, in the sense of making abundantly clear that none of this anything to do with that, and I don't want to relate to that. The reason I was always so explanatory about nation or the head thing, which was about to indicate that so nationalism, if you don't see nationalism, the speech you heard yesterday, I don't know where you live, but another one using symbology from another nationalist movement, for example, understand what nationalist means. But even that, I stopped trying to see that they haven't brought up again, because I think that gets too close to being political in the sense of U.S. politics, which is not my concern. They're not going to allow that to happen. Same logic, exactly the same logic, except in this case about instead of people politically related, with very criminals that I just said don't necessarily think are related to this crime. So basically not to help them receive help like they do, they do to Google, when they literally fuck around with the one thing that Google has to do to sell whatever they do to people, the products, either the ads or the products you see, of phones, etc. Yeah, trying to not give any help. Now again, as I said, my own personal views is one thing, but possible, I prefer to remain without poking at something that if not related to this crime. Now again, I'm not saying, if it's not related to this crime, it is. And if it is, well, as I said, pursue whatever means you find necessary to guarantee that justice is made for what is worth. But, as I pointed to you, I don't think that it necessarily is. As I said to you before, I asked about this, and again, it sounds weird. I don't know if I should continue on that one. What I was going to say is that, but what it seems like is something different. The issue is, this is not supposed to be about me, and I want you to appreciate how much it's affecting. And I'm distracted, which is why, what I was supposed to say was that they so much keep trying to make it look like it is some type of curriculum involved in this, and they have been doing that, as I said, for quite a while, that it might have an adverse effect on that. And as a response to that, my response has been to say what I keep saying, not quite keep, but said a couple times already, more than a couple, which is, I don't see how that would be a wise thing for criminals who have their crimes aimed for profit and very efficient whatever they do, despite their ultimate criminal intent, to be a part of a crime that is by definition public, and in all countries, assuming most crime is legal, over there, and one way or another, it wouldn't turn out too good. At first, we're going to raise awareness, we're going to raise keep things on the nose they really don't really want, particularly in the case with international outreach, right? So I don't see how, particularly this political conjecture right now, international politics, that would be a wise thing for any individual who does crime for a living to do, right? And that was the point. If you ever wonder why, it's because of this constant reminder that, not reminder, but you said it's a reminder that this is something to do with it, and I just keep saying, hey, look, it's possible. And if it is, again, you should do it. I'm not saying that it's not. By any means, take this as I don't know the word. I don't. Removable of guarantee of clearance is not quite endorsement. That would be the opposite. It's just being neutral. Don't see me clearing up anyone from responsibility. Quite to the contrary. I'm telling you I don't know, so you won't be able to. But the issue is, it just sounds very silly to me. One thing that is clear, though, is they see citizenship in general trying to look like that. That much I know as a positive fact. I don't know if they do that. Even if there is involvement, I don't know if they started after or before. After would be funny. But the issue is, what I can tell you for sure is, there is individuals trying to look bad. And this is being out with stereotypes from this crime since the very beginning. Okay? And as I said, bad people don't need to do that. In fact, they have to do the opposite. So, for what it's worth. And now they're taking that as instruction, so you can imagine now you're going to be seeing a lot of that too, which is, well, again, it's very few criminals would be so malicious as to listen to their own victim and think there's no repercussions. What I'm saying to you quite straightforward is, as I said, I don't know if there is any actual association with any organized group or institution whatsoever. What I do know is that the general public, or whoever is doing that in general, which you see as all those days, several times found it was part of the trend, part of funny, to pretend that there was. And it was one of the trends, and it comes and goes just like other trends, like hurting the animals and the other ones, and probably just as bright as the other ones. It's a bit less. I mean, hurting the animals actually would be worse, because it's just, the drug, it was worse. Instead of trying to, help out the criminals, or, again, give you, once again, have a leg up there can. And as I said, I've been saying that consistently. I don't know of any direct association there. That's important. Pay attention to that. So they're trying to eat with the thing that they did to him. Also, you have a couple other hints, which is the efficiency, the stupidity, and the rest, but and most importantly, the involvement of just about everybody and the mother into the crime, which is something that, if nothing else, it's not those institutions that are necessarily particularly efficient or exceptional in their work, but the issue is the involvement of everyone in the fucking that is very unusual and very unlikely as well. And you can see how actively participant everybody is, and that sounds to me very unlikely. Also, even police, very unlikely to be. Instead, it makes perfect sense. It's even in line for those criminals to try to look scary, as we saw yesterday, to pretend that they are. Okay? So, as I said to you, and this is clear to me since before Pond's life, which doesn't mean that they cannot cause harm. I mean, I literally just shown to you how much the baby is struggling to eat for something they started after I mentioned the animals never being sick. And a couple weeks or 1 week before Chip's problem started. It's entirely different. That's the lick in the thing he showed that I just showed you, which means that he itches or causes things as well. Okay, so the harm is very real. I'm just saying to you that I don't see how career criminals, people who do crime for a living, either organized or not, would be necessarily involved in this. And I am telling you categorically, I do not know. It wouldn't surprise me in the slightest if they are. It wouldn't surprise me in the slightest if they're involved in a less significant way. What I'm saying to you is what we know for a fact, and there's no escaping of this, is that everybody else is. Because you've seen that. You've seen that yesterday, you see that all the time. And that's in itself a very unusual thing for any type of criminal organization to function like, because they don't tend to usually involve everybody else in the thing, and not to a minor degree, and also just such a, you see what you see, right? Don't emphasize the major points here. And I'm just saying, the whole point of this was to emphasize, I find it very peculiar that they found that this was a good idea, because essentially what they're doing is they're essentially incriminating here, raising a lot of awareness into those groups, right? That might not be the wisest thing to do. So, just making that clear to you, with the arguments as what I think yes and no, and again, the fact that I don't know. Could it be? Yeah, maybe, I don't know. It's not, again, necessarily always taking the most strategic decision ever, and sure as hell not necessarily the brightest, no, for what it's worth. The brightest source, I was going to say. But, that being said, this is something that is positively unwise, given, again, the very inherent public nature of it all, and the fact that one way or another, as I said, it's only so much that police as an institution, not just individual police officer, but as an institution can deduce that they are doing or not doing, helping or not helping. And if something explicit that is indeed caused by criminals, career criminals who do crime every day, you would have the expectation that there will be active work to do that, because as it turns out, as I said before, locking them up in jail is in everyone's benefit, right? Supposedly, assuming that they're involved. And they're involved is in everyone's benefit, period. And if they are involved in this, that's a good avenue to make that very much in talking, you see things, and so on and so forth. So my point is, I don't think this is gonna will get you there because of the previous, because of what I just said. Just a second. But I don't listen to anything. Quite important information that you know. That being said, as I told you before, and it's gonna be a constant bouncing forth. So imagine that when have you ever actually heard of me talk influenced by the things going on, which is the things that are flowing through there, I don't know. And ultimately, I think this, I don't know if I want to publish that for the sake of being online available to you. I don't know if I'm going to publish that immediately though, because a person would likely listen to that for their own criminal ways. And most importantly, it just sounds weird. And it sounds weird mostly because of drugs in the air, as I said to you. And the time when they get me to piss myself is because it's the drugs in the air for me to piss myself. Plain and simple, right? Because for the other things, like yesterday, you see what I was and see what I was doing. So, that's the one time when they get me to piss myself. In this case, it sounds weird because the drugs are in the air and the fact that I had to remove the things while talking. I found it was funny to comment to you that that they keep trying to sell this rhetoric so much that they're going to end up having the benefit of it, because alienating the very criminals selling the drugs to them, presumably, if that's the case, and one way or another. But as I said, I don't know. I don't know if they're not involved already. I don't know if they would be involved. That would be stupid the way, as I pointed out, especially for the higher echelons. Because, again, no matter what, it's simple logic. If you do crime for a living, whatever it is, drugs or otherwise, you don't want their reputation, most important than the one that other reputation alone, but you don't want their heat, so to speak. I think it's a common language. And most importantly, because no matter what, you should probably either want it or if some police gonna look into it, and you don't want to just more and more. And again, Al Capone was arrested for tax evasion. So pay your taxes. essentially, is my point. And something that is essentially gratuitous doesn't net anything to anyone, doesn't benefit in any way anyone. And I'm telling you categorically that as far as I'm concerned, I don't know. Which is essentially the point. In other words, in a very weird way. And that's the point. See how weird it is? See how I have those moments of being able to talk and then it just dies and then it in waves again? Yeah, that's what I keep saying every day. As I said to you before, but now this cannot be online either way, because what it would give is the perceived notion of compliance, and compliance in a dangerous way. So what would happen, based on this experience, that essentially would, instead of focusing on the crucial points that I just mentioned throughout this, including the main one, all the way down to the fact this is the MO, that something happened to cause this type of change in behavior, even though it has been the thing that I've been saying steadily throughout this entire crime. So, based on that will still available to you later, especially by the time I already know everything. It's going to be the late releases, but not immediately. And for what it's worth, as I said to you, very much there for you to see. Father, they have put a hole on my pants. I didn't even notice what I was wearing them. Either way. That being said, there's no incident that happened at all that I could point out. Period. And as I said to you, I don't doubt that there are career criminals involved in this in an individual basis. I don't particularly believe that it's a logical thing for a big thing to do. It's just a way to just kind of backhand slap the argument. Because, yeah, I wouldn't be surprised that small drug dealers or thieves or other criminals in a smaller scale that don't have rising up to that much will be involved in that. You see small companies, see the same reference. You see legal companies involved in this crime. Yeah, different reasons, but kind of the same thing that shouldn't happen. Same way, they have same logic applicable, and it wouldn't be a big surprise. What we know for a fact, though, is that the general business shit, everybody, as you saw yesterday in the mall and everywhere in the streets and everywhere in here, is, truckers and companies in general, people in the streets, and, students, high schools, general everyone, right? So, and they do try to pretend to be some of that. Just scare me, because, again, that tends to work beautifully in that thing. Meaning that every time now these days it happens, they're exposed to you immediately, and you can clearly see what they are. Meaning, not only it doesn't work, but it serves as though it demonstrates to you how collective and how generalized this is. And ultimately, as I pointed out, while this is full lying, you see the mouth moving, they're lying, and pretending to be something that they're not, and say, so this to scare me, is textbook what they do every day. It's very unlikely for those institutions or whatever fucking organized crime, if it is, whatever, one way or another, should indeed do collective crimes this way. Again, the whole thing about keeping it tight. So, all those reasons lead me to conclude what I say to you. I can guarantee a couple of things, though. Some macabre crime happened because of this should be mentioned to me, for me to be mentioned to you, and this should be coming up to my mind. So I can tell you those are the macabre crimes, which is still in line for what they do. The same way they saw me talking about random other things at random other days. They sounded a bit odd. I think the best one was the Venezuelan case recently. And I said the whole, didn't the Venezuelan president was a man? No, not talking about Maduro. Talking about the guy who actually won the election. Because I remember being a man. And then all of a sudden you see the female, which is there. And then apparently there's this whole thing where she's actually Maduro's vice president and greatest supporter, which is beautiful. But for what it's worth, I'm not surprised. The issue is wow, he's seeing the man wife, of either way, cellmate of your boy. But for what it's worth, just keep that in mind. Sorry, I'm distracted. Focus to the point. That coming up to me a couple of days ago was random. I have not a clue in my mind why I randomly remembered that the elected president of Venezuela was the guy. Because in my opinion, that was the case. The U.S. was openly supporting the left, never recognized Maduro as president. And when the ousting happened, my idea was they had just instituted the officially elected one. I didn't know about details and didn't catch it, to be honest, from my concern. My issue is also that shows up. This showing up in my mind is relevant. And it's also something in line for what Presidente does throughout this. We're talking about war criminals, we're talking about Mengele crimes, we're talking about drugs misuse crime, and as I mentioned before, it's not like drug dealers are picky about the customers, right? When I buy whatever amount that they buy for that purpose. Just saying. Is there a question is there a point, as I said before, to me, that I believe that none of those things are related to any group of organized crime? No, I don't know. As I said to you, I don't know. Don't see how, again, it's not like they want the marketing, unlike those companies, mind you. They see some companies using this crime as a way even to market that. That's not usually something they want. As I said, you have like, in one case, you have everything piling up in one pile, and the other one, everything piling up in another pile. That's my conclusion. I do not know. You have to investigate, by the way. You have to actually look into it to see if that's the case or not. Because if it is, it's advantageous in another way. It's a way to just get law enforcement to work, because now you're no longer just being involved with the things, now we'll be involved with the groups themselves. That'll be fantastic as far as evidence goes to use to get results. Because again, imagine talking to a reporter, you don't have exactly jurisdiction over this random place, but if you can tie it up there in a way, you can showcase that no politician is ever going to support that. I mean, come on. And you can just tell that to everyone else around the world as well, in the sense that, I mean, are you serious? Again, so, as I said to you, it's bad for that, but also, again, it's useful for you if that's the case, which is what I'm telling you. Don't take this as any sign of endorsement for yes and for no. As I said, I just don't know. It doesn't make much sense to me. There was no incident, as far as I can remember, other than where it's kind of like what you see on, I don't know when exactly, where you see individuals pretending to do that. As I said several times, and each of them is lawful. As I said to you, was they're doing the hand gestures, pretend to be mafia guys, which, yeah, and they'll definitely never do that, because, again, if you're seen as incredibly racist against your own race. So, again, a black guy identifying himself as a nigger to a white person, which, I mean, it can happen. It's just not something we'd expect them to do that, especially boosting how badass that is. So, again, for what it's worth, racial slur usually not a go-to action. But for someone who doesn't understand the culture and is pretending something else, then all of a sudden it becomes more sensible, right? And that's the point. Right? You're telling me that this and shit is lying and pretending something that they're not? Now that's a surprise, right? So, as I said, you know that they're lying because their mouth moves. So yeah, that's it. Why that's too long, something that should be a single sentence to last this long, that has to do with the drugs being thrown on me now. Why that came up in my mind in the first place, well, that's the macabre crime. And I imagine it has something to do with some of those nights, as of recently. That's what I can say. For what it's worth, as I said, none of that's missing from what I say every day, period. So go for it, investigate everything. If that is, there's no way that they're going to be able to hide it, right? You can trace that through a variety of means. That's also the other thing, how easy it is to trace, because everybody knows. And then you are using drugs on me, and you can trace which ones substances they are and how they're being used. So it's not like it's important. Quite to the contrary, it's trivially easy to track, to the point where it's impossible to convince anyone that law enforcement would have known about it by the time when they choose to do that, which, again, fantastic evidence to find results in the end. Also, I just want to point out, it's a casual note for the brightness of this. Whichever criminals, the criminals decide that in the same day that they were cramping up with crimes of 2 days ago, do the thing with Tanya with the phone, and then, as I call Tanya, do the same thing on her phone, which crosses state boundaries. As I said before, that's a definition, it's a involvement of another police force, it's federal police. Now, imagine again, if this had indeed more organized groups involved in that. Not a particularly wise choice, right? Because my former resources usually dealing with more organized groups of criminals. So I'm just saying, Now it's not just about, and it's not just about jurisdiction as they can do, but they'd be expected to, particularly if there's indeed organized criminals involved in it. So again, as I said, also being stupid, and it happened, the fact that I happened like a couple of days ago, and you know that this macabre crime showed up. No, again, I don't think that was the expectation. I think the expectation was something to say there, like, ooh, strong, which, by the way, I always told you that they were doing crimes to kind of spawn at the same time as he, so well, even there you can see the pretense if compared to reality, because nothing has really changed. That was always the case. But the fact it's trying to boost that up now is that the unintended effect is that now it is very squarely under the jurisdiction of something much bigger. And besides, when you tell that to someone else, right, tell that to Americans, tell that to other people, and you say that this is under strictly jurisdiction of something as large as the federal police in a country with half the population in the U.S., and then it goes down with larger population in Russia. You choose whichever one you prefer to, as exacerbate how this is not just some backwater, Paraguay couldn't resist. And then you say that, and then you have like organized criminal groups involved there for absolutely no gain, because nothing, you didn't get anything. I mean, as I said, it's not like they want marketing, right? Just because. I'm just saying that this is the logic where I follow to say the conclusion that I have. Actually, I'll publishing it. You tend to work out towards the end. It's not like I said that there was something wrong with it. I'm just saying to you, that's it. So this is the other thing that I was thinking, and I was kind of unsure throughout this as it was not quite working out. So, and as I pointed out, if there is the case, and as I said, I don't know. Be sure to use that to get actual results in the justice. After all, as I said, no politician, no anyone, and even the public in general, in other places, would find that even marginally acceptable. But yeah. Either way, as I talked, just to clarify the safe boundaries there, it's not just about the communication, right? It's about exactly the same crime happening to different things in the same way in different places, which the only jurisdiction would apply would be, not only, it technically be treated locally as separate, but at the end of the day, to be precise, it would be qualifying as the same crime because it's essentially the same thing being done alternately in separate places for that. Again, I don't think that was intended. I think the intended was just, ooh, really strong. But that was the ultimate effect, and that's to be expected. So as I said, it's not just even about what they want to or don't want to. That's public, much like everything else, which means that, especially indeed, as I said, if they are criminals one way or another, means that, well, something else you can leverage to get the things they want. So, then as far as news goes, something else that is shocking for you to be able to accurately describe to everybody else. Kind of like how news work. So, neat, right? But as I said to you, this is the point. Which ultimately back is even the question, like, what is even the idea? And as I said, there's the whole point of this recording specifically, this video specifically, was to say that they keep saying and trying to boost to me and trying to pretend to be some of those organizations, that they might end up having something that doesn't quite reach that. As I said, to me, I never interacted with any of them. My point is strictly logical from the beginning to the end. But they keep trying to essentially incriminate them, right? To get me to believe that that's the case. They know they don't tell the truth. That might not play out as a benefit to them, to essentially in general, as you'd expect. Particularly because they're very well identified. So, not my intention though. I just said to you, and that's why I mentioned that here, which they would listen to. I'm just plain and simple saying, not enough to do with me. Never interact with anyone. So in fact, I interact with anyone, period. Remember that I said that? I said it's bad, but has some quirks, some benefits. Has some perks. Bugs is, I can very clearly say, don't interact with anyone in any degree, socially or otherwise. My behavior is consistent with that, despite the narcotics and other drugs that they throw on me to the contrary. And that is abundantly clear. That was always the case, and now everyone with access to knowledge always understood that. Right now, we have things already published, explicitly as of this point, which doesn't really make that much of a difference as far as the overall crime, because it was always available to the press no matter what. And besides, as I said to you, and didn't even kind of focus on as much as I should. There's nothing to gain by any career criminal to be a part. I mentioned that now. I don't know why my brain felt like I hadn't emphasized that as much, like I just mentioned in passing. I think that I used different words. What was in my mind was doing that just for fun. Yeah, that was the one that I was going to use. It's essentially the same thing. I think, that's not usually how it goes. One of the things about organized crime specifically is trying to be efficient and pragmatic, and to do something just for no reason at all that boosts nothing, and the only thing it accomplishes is that, even though that I never myself pointed at, if not quite to the contrary, as I'm doing right now. No, doubtlessly, the pissing shit would try to get me to just rant about it, which is why I believe that they're going for this. Pissing shit, not the thing. But I'm not. Quite to the contrary. You see me saying now, I think that it's very logical reason to presume the contrary. That being said, you should investigate no matter what, especially because they don't lie as well. I mean, the criminals lie. Are you serious? But the issue is, it doesn't sound particularly logical to me overall, just in plain simple terms. That being said, again, that's what I'm saying to you. Maybe I'm wrong. I've been wrong before. I mean, clearly, you really imagine. And you should check that anyways, and I just don't know. So, be advised on that. I emphasize that enough times, right? Because I'm terrified of also the opposite. So I have this very narrow strip, and I keep dangling on those, ropes that people walk on top of to make sure that on one hand, I don't do what it seems to be clearly the intention, which is to rent as a way to be ranting about organized crime and other things like this, to probably be involving or helping them gain, kind of like they did with Google, for instance, except that unlike, companies tend to be exceptionally non-emotional, so I'm quite sure that Google's concern is going to be strictly that what they're doing deliberately harms the market. Money. In simple terms, money. But I don't think for it to be the favor on something else. So that's one concern from one side. To the other side, I have to say the two things, which is, I don't know. Maybe that is. It's not criminals are particularly smart, even career criminals are particularly smart. Even though, again, organized crime tends to be pragmatic, which makes sense that joining something for fun doesn't really add up quite as much as to something, again, by definition public, by definition available to other people to see, very likely to blow up internationally in a time where there are other things blowing up internationally. And I'm just saying that, again, everything ends up to one point, but maybe. And it's not like, again, you can clearly see the intent on pissing shit and something that they did before, and so on and so forth. But at the same case, nothing to do with me, and interacting with anyone, quite to the contrary, and if nothing else, it makes some degree of sense that don't know where I was going for that, but either way, the point is, no matter what happens, I just, as I said, dingling that and trying to make it very clear to you, okay? Also, and most importantly, making very clear to you that this is not getting away, that's not escape route, because actually that seems to be more the case. If you want to know what the point there is to say that crime has been done to me or done by some mysterious man that has, again, nothing to gain, a lot to lose, very unlike to all those organizations to act on impulse despite logic, particularly with me never bringing that up as a guilty party to begin with, even saying that makes sense. And I can see, even though you can clearly notice everybody else being a part of this voluntarily and very joyfully at that, they're trying to use that weasel that way to do some crime to me, throw down a buggyman, and try to get away with that despite the fact, again, you can physically see everybody enjoying the shit of the harm they do to me. So, because of that, as I said, not willing to allow that to happen. And now I'm just going online. It's interesting how we get to me savaging it. It's kind of impressive in a way. Most of those videos I want to often don't quite work like that. And that's my point. Okay? So, categorically, as far as facts go, nothing recent happened. As far as I could point out. Some macabre crime happened at night, and the best reference I'll say to that is the same thing that happened for me to remember the a Venezuelan president thing, which I even said on that video. I have no fucking clue why I'm saying this for. And a test before the application is something that you also see them do to me recently in other things. In the phone, on the 17th, for the crime that they did on 21st and 22nd, the tryouts for other things as well. You see how they like to do that, just part of the brave way. The way that they perceive bravery, right? They want to test the water first, you know how certain types of animals tend to do that, and you have a very pejorative way to address that, particularly men. But the issue is, and that's what this shit is about. So even there, as I'm pointing, that being said, categorically, don't know. Even those recent nights, last night, for instance, it was recording the entire night on two phones. This talking about your phones. I think there's one phone that's still there. Also the other ones are being insane, and the only time that we do it is because of that. Also, the idea of the buggymen has been something that's been played throughout this for some time, and throughout this time I've been trying that. That's something that was used since back home, and it never kind of went away, except that, as I said to you before, it just doesn't make any sense at all the second you go past the surface. So, yeah, anything from MO to intentions to motives to everything else, nothing else makes sense. Everything else dies after you stop for a second and you think, yeah, but why or how, or I mean, you can see how it beneficiates everybody else. But the prince, I'm quite sure it's a mere coincidence that it goes when I go around there into the time when the wind blows into my face. But I'm not destroying the thing that I just somehow salvaged for this. Still don't know if I published it immediately or not. I think I should. You know. It's the right thing to do. Besides, there's another the things you get to see, especially if you listen to what I just said. It just makes perfect sense. Yeah. Besides, as I said, this is not making this and shit more or less likely. This essentially just that they already have access to the criminal ways. Everyone has access to the criminal ways anyways. For accessing the phone. The only difference is it provides you with the possibility for a good person to listen to that and see through it. And that might be something you want online as soon as possible, because potential crimes being trying to throw on this buggyman, or career criminals as I call them, anyone else. Again, which back is also the question: what is even the point, right? Think for 2 seconds. When I say it makes a heck of a lot of sense for all the individuals you see trying to blame down on a buggyman if they intend to harm me, especially for law enforcement and less. But which is actually pretty bad for them. It's something to think about it, but I don't think that they have. But the issue is but why would it be good? I think we understand each other as far as what this goes. Like, for what it's worth, and in that. So that's what I'm saying to you. That's the logic I have, and I haven't interrupted anyone. That did anything. This thing is something I was looking and playing with. It's connected to this phone, the Bluetooth. I'm just connecting now. I'm just saying that I was acting in a weird way as if it was some type of recording device, and I was like, yeah, it's connected to this phone. Which means that, yeah, I'm recording in it. It is indeed. It is doing exactly that. But as I said, you see how self-conscious or how self-aware, not self-aware, but how, there's a word for that. I am about that, yeah. Remember yesterday, when I was pointing at the animals, and I was seeing the gas lighting down and trying to say that somehow I caused a very tiny wounds in Chip's face that you saw her scratching today? Right after saying the disease, so it makes the question. You first mention the disease, which makes some sense, and then you jump from that to some freak, well, again, and tells you if you need to know. Yeah, there. So, also, by the way, that brightness there, the genius that it is referencing, be the ones coming up with this idea. And the whole point, again, the original point for this was precisely to mention that they keep trying to bring it up, some type of organized crime in this as a scapegoat, and they might end up having the short end of the stick on that again. But in the issue is, I never interacted with any of this, and saying that out of the void becomes almost like a problematic statement for the other side, and that's the dingling on top of the rope that I mentioned before, because as I said, nothing ends up that much to me for that, but at the same pace, the honesty almost apologetic as if I'm afraid or concerned of something happening and kind of complying with something, which is not the case. So, keep bouncing between the two. Now, things do happen, as they have always happened, and indeed, as I said to you, you should investigate and should make sure, and if there is involvement, it will make a difference either way, you're going to find that out. But as I'm telling you, I just don't know. And what I do know, though, is the active interest from businesses, the ones actually doing things, should create a buggyman. So if some crime is done to me, they can hide behind it, and then you just go listen. The criminals are doing the best we can, the whole routine, and that's not going to fly. And if you have been through survival, as I have all this time, and again, life thing situations is an average Tuesday, you would understand what I mean by preventing that from being an escape route that business should have. Okay? So, as I said to you, every argument points one way, business points the other. That's the way I see it. Or at the same time, as I said to you, in the first thing I said, the idea that being mildly apologetic to drug or any other crime is laughable. So, more power to them actually making that point if they want to. And Scotia is going to play out as beautiful as all the other genius ideas they had. So.